She faced discrimination for her skin color. What she did changed history forever. What would you do if the very thing that defines you became a target for ridicule and hate? This is the story of Emma, a woman whose only flaw in the eyes of others was the color of her skin. Yet despite the prejudice, she turned her pain into power, and her courage sparked a revolution. Emma grew up in a small town where whispers spoke louder than words. From the moment she could understand the world around her, she knew she was different. Her dark, radiant skin, inherited from generations of proud ancestors, was a source of quiet shame for others in her predominantly pale-skinned community. At school, the insults started small, snide comments, mocking laughter when she walked into the room. By the time she was a teenager, the discrimination grew harsher. Teachers overlooked her talents, classmates avoided her during group projects, and job opportunities seemed to vanish the moment employers saw her face. Her heart broke the day she overheard her best friend's mother saying, "She's smart, but she'll never go far. People like her never do." Emma tried to ignore it, focusing instead on her dreams of becoming a lawyer, someone who could fight for people like her. But the weight of the world's prejudice bore down on her daily. Could she truly make a difference in a society that refused to see her worth? Emma's breaking point came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. She had just finished an interview for an internship at one of the city's most prestigious law firms. It was the opportunity she'd been preparing for her entire life. As she walked out of the building, clutching her resume and portfolio, she overheard the receptionist whisper to a colleague, "I can't believe they even let her in the door. Someone like her in a place like this? Unthinkable." The words stung, but what followed was worse. Hours later, she received an email from the firm. "Thank you for applying, but we have chosen a more suitable candidate." She knew what suitable meant. That night, Emma sat on the floor of her tiny apartment, her head in her hands. She felt as though the world had conspired against her. It was of her grandmother, a woman who had survived unimaginable hardships during the civil rights movement. Beneath the photo, her grandmother's handwritten words read, "You are stronger than their hate." Something shifted inside Emma. The pain was still there, but now it was accompanied by a spark of determination. If the world wanted to doubt her, she would prove them wrong. She wouldn't just survive their prejudice. She would rise above it. The next morning, Emma woke up with a new resolve. She wasn't sure where to start, but she knew she couldn't let the voices of prejudice drown her out. She remembered her grandmother's words, "You are stronger than their hate." But strength wasn't enough. She needed a plan. She began researching influential figures who had broken barriers before her. Names like Thurgood Marshall, Rosa Parks, and Maya Angelou filled her notebooks. Their stories of resilience lit a fire in her heart. They had faced hate, ridicule, and even violence, yet they had changed the world. Emma realized she needed to stop asking for a seat at the table. She had to build her own. She reached out to a local community center that offered free legal aid to marginalized groups. Although they had no paid positions, Emma volunteered to assist with cases involving racial discrimination and workplace inequality. At first, the work was overwhelming. She saw the same struggles in others that she had endured her entire life, stories of being dismissed, overlooked, and treated as less than human. But every time she helped a client win their case or gave them a voice in court, Emma felt a growing sense of purpose. One day, while reviewing a case file late at night, she stumbled upon a law that had been quietly overlooked for decades. A legal loophole that, if challenged, could reshape hiring practices in her state. The discovery sent chills down her spine. This wasn't just a chance to help one person, it was an opportunity to rewrite the rules. Emma's discovery ignited a spark of hope, but the road ahead was anything but smooth. When she first pitched her findings to the community center's director, she was met with skepticism. Do you know how many people have tried to challenge these laws and failed? The director said, his tone more concerned than dismissive. It's a fight worth having, but it won't be easy. Emma knew the risks. Taking on powerful corporations and systemic practices would require resources she didn't have. Still, she refused to let fear stop her. She began reaching out to activists, legal experts, and anyone willing to listen. Some slammed the door in her face, others dismissed her as naive, but a handful saw her passion and agreed to help. Together, they formed a small but determined coalition. Late nights became the norm as they pored over documents, strategized legal arguments, and prepared for what felt like an impossible battle. Emma faced constant setbacks, paperwork delays, insufficient funds, and smear campaigns that painted her as an agitator rather than a reformer. The personal toll was heavy. Friends grew distant, unable to understand why she was devoting her life to a cause that seemed unwinnable. Bills piled up, and Emma often skipped meals to save money for filing fees. Her health began to waver, and doubt crept back into her mind. But every time she thought about quitting, she remembered the faces of the people she was fighting for. The single mother denied a job because of her accent, the young man fired for wearing his natural hair, and the elderly janitor passed over for promotion because of his skin color. Their stories became her fuel. Months turned into years, and finally, Emma's coalition had their day in court. It was a small victory just to get the case heard. But as Emma stood before the judge, presenting her arguments with a steady voice, she felt the weight of every struggle she had endured. This wasn't just about a legal loophole anymore. It was about proving that change was possible, even when the odds were stacked against you. The courtroom was silent as Emma finished her closing argument. The judge peered over his glasses, his expression unreadable. Emma's coalition sat in the back row, their hands clasped tightly, praying for a miracle. The case had drawn attention far beyond what anyone had anticipated. News outlets covered the story, social media buzzed with debates, and Emma's name became a trending topic. But with attention came backlash. Anonymous threats flooded her inbox, and protesters gathered outside the courthouse, holding signs that read, "Stop stirring trouble." Emma's resolve never wavered, but inside, she was terrified. She had poured every ounce of herself into this fight, risking her reputation, her safety, and her future. What if it wasn't enough? Then came the unexpected turn. On the final day of the trial, just as the judge was about to deliver his verdict, a man in the courtroom stood up. He was older, wearing a sharp suit, and his face was familiar. Too familiar. Emma's breath caught in her throat. It was the CEO of one of the corporations her case directly implicated. "I have something to say," he announced, his voice carrying an authority that demanded attention. The judge hesitated but allowed him to speak. The man turned to Emma and the court. "For years, my company has benefited from practices that frankly I'm ashamed to admit. We've turned a blind eye to discrimination and let systemic inequality persist because it was convenient for us, but no more." Gasps rippled through the room. "Miss Emma Thompson," he continued, "your courage has forced me and others like me to take a hard look at ourselves. I'm here today to publicly commit to changing our company's policies and supporting legislation to ensure fairness in hiring practices. The world needs people like you, and it's time we listen." Emma was stunned. She had prepared for battle, not for a concession. The judge called for order as murmurs filled the courtroom. This wasn't just a victory, it was a turning point. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for interviews, and supporters flooded the steps, cheering Emma's name. For the first time, she saw not just hope, but proof that her fight had made a difference. But the greatest shock came later that evening. The CEO's statement sparked a domino effect. Within weeks, other major corporations announced similar reforms. Politicians began drafting new legislation, citing Emma's case as their inspiration. What started as a small fight for justice had become a nationwide movement. Emma sat on the worn couch in her tiny apartment, watching the news in disbelief. Every major channel was covering the ripple effects of her case. Headlines flashed across the screen: landmark case sparks nationwide reform, corporations pledge equality after courageous legal battle, and Emma Thompson, the woman who changed the game. She barely recognized herself in the footage, standing confidently on the courthouse steps, delivering a speech that had gone viral worldwide. For the first time in years, Emma felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel fully before: pride. The movement grew beyond her wildest dreams. Non-profits dedicated to combating discrimination reached out, asking her to join their boards. Universities invited her to speak about her journey, and students from all backgrounds lined up to tell her how much her story inspired them. But the most powerful moment came a few months later, when she was invited to a ceremony in Washington, D.C. On that day, in front of a crowd of thousands, the governor signed a new law ensuring fair hiring practices statewide. As Emma stood on the stage, holding the signed bill in her hands, she thought back to the girl who had once sat crying on her apartment floor, questioning her worth. That girl could never have imagined this moment. The crowd erupted into applause, but one voice stood out among the rest. In the front row, her mother and younger brother beamed with pride, tears streaming down their faces. Beside them was her grandmother's framed photograph, held high by her cousin. Emma smiled, her voice steady as she addressed the crowd. "This is not just my victory. It belongs to everyone who has ever been told they're not enough because of who they are. It belongs to those who fought before me and those who will come after. Together, we have proven that change is possible, no matter how impossible it seems." Her words echoed through the crowd, reaching the hearts of everyone present. Emma's fight didn't just change her life, it altered the course of history. Her courage inspired legislation, transformed corporate policies, and gave hope to countless people facing the same struggles she once did. But Emma's story isn't just about triumph over prejudice. It's a reminder that every voice matters, and even the smallest spark can ignite a movement. What do you think about Emma's journey? Have you ever faced similar challenges or witnessed someone rise against the odds? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to hear more inspiring stories like this one.